Hi there, this is Andrea Maury of Andrea Renee Knits, and this is a little weekly podcast called I'll Knit If I Want To, where I try my best to answer some of your questions. This week I am wearing Gib. It is lovely, lovely fall weather here in Maine. Sun's coming out today. Yesterday was just a torrential downpour all day long, but today it's lovely, it's brisk, and it feels so good to have a sweater on. So this is the Gib pullover named after my grandpa, and it is knit up in Brooklyn tweed and Bew, and you can see it has like cute little cabled raglans. One of my all-time favorite stitch patterns. It's just a simple knit purl stitch pattern, but I love it. I love the texture it adds. I feel like it makes a sweater or whatever you're knitting just have that like classic timeless look. So anyways, I will, as always, link this pattern below, but let's go ahead and jump into some questions. Question number 1 this week is about sleeves. I have knitted some sweaters by now. I'm guessing they meant to say I've knitted quite a few sweaters by now. And one thing that I need to adjust in all of them were the sleeves. Usually I need to knit another 4 to 5 centimeters or 2 inches after the pattern says to stop. Now that I know this, I was wondering if I should change the decrease rate to evenly spread the decrease along my longer sleeves. The reason I'm in doubt is that most patterns suggest to add length at the end. What is your look on this? Is there a reason for not changing the decrease rate? Honestly, I think what's happening is in the patterns, they're just trying to make it easy for most knitters. You know, it's not going to hugely affect how that sleeve looks and how it wears by not spreading those decreases out that extra couple inches or centimeters that you're adding to your sleeve. So they just want to make it as easy as possible to make that modification, because sleeve length is definitely personal. Some of us have long arms, some of us have short, some of us like long sleeves, some of us don't. I have realized in the past, 10 years that I used to love all my sleeves to be really, really long. Like I wanted them halfway up my fingers. Now I'm like, no ma'am, I want a bracelet length and that's it. And maybe it's being a mom and I cook a lot and I just am constantly doing this. But I just realized, oh, I don't actually love having super long sleeves anymore. So it's just personal preference. It's our own style. I like to layer my sweaters over like a collared shirt, and I want the sleeves to be short enough that the shirt I'm wearing underneath can kind of poke up the bottom. So anyways, I digress. They're just trying to make it easy on you. If you want to spread those decreases out a little more, absolutely can. Go for it. It's not gonna make or break the pattern. So it's really just up to you. If that is kind of a fun way to personalize the pattern even more for you, then go for it. If you don't feel like fiddling, don't worry about it. It's not gonna hugely impact it. But especially if it's telling you to space those decreases out, a lot of instructions do say, repeat this decrease or increase depending on which direction you're going, but repeat this decrease every inch, 12 more times. Well, if you know that you're gonna add 2 inches, there's no reason not to do it every 1 1/4 inch. I'm sorry, you did lead in centimeters, but you know what I'm saying. Add that extra centimeter between your decreasing if you want to. All right, next question. I have recently been given several kilograms of wool from my uncle's farm. Most of it was hand spun by my late grandmother. The yarn is currently in the largest skeins I've ever seen, weighing about ½ a kilo each, and it still has lanolin in it. I have no idea which breed of sheep the wool is or how grandma spun from a technical perspective, although I assume she was used to spinning fairly tight for knitting things like Bavarian style socks. These are her later works from when age was catching up, and according to the family, they are thicker than her usual yarn was. So the question is, how can I determine what yarn weight this is? Going by eyesight, I'd estimate it could be anything from a sport to a worsted. It hasn't been washed yet. It might be on the heavier side. So I would use one of these tools. I think that is going to be the easiest way to try and estimate what that yarn weight is. So you can see these little divots here. You can lay your yarn right in to the divot to try and figure out what weight it is. So I have a random ball of yarn right here that I use for swatching in tutorials. And you would just start, I just don't want it to start trying to focus on my face. So you would just kind of decide which gap it fills in the best. Focus on this. Boop. It's trying. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that when you are laying it in there, don't pull it. It's really tempting to like pull it into the gap. Don't do that because you're then stretching it out and making the yarn look thinner than it is. So for instance, this yarn, I would say is a worsted weight for sure. If I just wanted to go by that. There it is. But the other thing you can do is wraps per inch, and that's another way to determine what the yarn weight is. So this tool also has the wraps per inch slot right up here. And so you would just wind your yarn around and you would keep going until you filled up that gap. Again, this is not the most precise way to figure out yarn weight, because what happens is we kind of like swatching, we're all gonna wrap this yarn a little differently. You don't, again, don't tug it, that's gonna thin it out. Just kind of let it gently fill up that space. So I think I could fit one more in there. Let's see how many that gives me. 2, 4, 6, 8. So that would give me 9, which is worsted. So both ways, going into that little slot and wrapping it, landed me at a worsted weight. So I feel pretty confident that it's a worsted weight. But from there, especially with hand spun, here is what I found. So this is with my own hand spun yarn, or if you have a mystery ball of yarn, you know, you have your mystery yarn that also happens to be hand spun, but a lot of times we have random cakes, some extra leftover balls of yarn that maybe we forgot to keep the label with it. We're just like, what is this? So this is a great trick to trying to figure out what those odds and ends are. And this is the way I go about it, is I start with this tool. Unfortunately, the maker of this tool isn't on here. If anybody knows the brand of this, it was actually a gift in a Tour de Fleece package last year. It's so pretty. It has this beautiful, I think that's a poppy, which is my birth flower. So I think it's extra beautiful. But it's a really beautiful one. I also love Katrinkles, which I've shown on here a million times. I know you can get them from her. But if anybody else does know the name of this maker, please feel free to shout it out in the comments below, because I don't know who made it. It's so pretty. Okay, so this is where I start whenever I'm trying to classify my yarn, is doing it in the slot, wrapping it around, getting my wraps per inch. You don't have to have a tool to do wraps per inch, by the way. You can use a pencil, a pen, a random bobbin you've got lying around. All you would do is, again, wrap it. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. Some people really like a round thing like this because you can roll it onto your yarn and they feel like we don't have as much tendency to pull too tight. But you could wrap it and then you could just measure an inch and then count the strands within the inch. So you don't have to have a special tool. So that is where I always start. I start there and I say, okay, I think this is approximately a worsted weight yarn. But what I have found, there has been so many times where I think I've got yarn that is a sport weight, and then I start knitting it. And I find this true, especially of hand spun yarn, is that it is so full of life and energy that when I start knitting it, it likes to spread out a little bit. You know, it tends to just like, ooh, thank you. I'm just gonna take some space here. And I feel like it always ends up actually being a DK. So I would also say wash it. If your grandma did not wash it after she had spun it, that is going to change things. It's probably gonna puff up. it's just going to change things. So I would wash it first before trying to figure out the yarn weight. And you wash it just like you're blocking a sweater. But what I was going to say is, so get your estimate, but then knit some swatches on some different size needles and see what really works well for that fabric. And that might kind of help you determine even more, like if it actually wants to be knit up closer to like, you know, a size 11 needle, well, maybe I actually have closer to like an Aran weight yarn, or maybe it's really happy on a 9 and I'm like, yeah, this is great for worsted, or, you know, sometimes I kind of adjust my reasoning once I actually am knitting with it. So, but I think that especially if you're just trying to get an estimate, a little tool like this is so great. So I hope that helps. All right, next question. I always have one water bottle with some electrolyte in it, so that's why I'm shaking things up over here. Oh, and I did have somebody ask in a previous episode what this water bottle is. It's Owala. Owala, and I love it. It's still going strong as I think my favorite water bottle. Because, and you're gonna see I would have lip gloss on, but I love that the cap, ignore my lip gloss that I just messed it up with. It has a hole, the front of it's just a straw, and you can, or you can chug it. And I love the option. And I got the big one. I like to drink a lot of water. And I like that this one is big, but because of that, it's heavy. So I like to just be able to use the straw. This is not an affiliate. I do not have, they don't give me a kickback for this promotion, but I do like it. It's a great water bottle. All right, on to the next question. Okay, this question I get multiple times every week. And I'm pretty sure I've covered it before, but I'm going to cover it again. Also, I'm going to apologize. I need to wipe the corner of my nose. And I'm just curious if anybody else has this affliction. Ever since I had my kids, my left nostril is always runny. Always. It's the worst if I eat anything. And it doesn't have to be like, you know, whenever you eat spicy food or a hot bowl of soup, like your nose will get a little runny. No, it doesn't matter. I can have a cold smoothie and I still am going to have to blow my nose. But you know what I can't ever remember is to grab a tissue. I rarely have one when I need one, especially at a meal. And I'm like, I know this is going to get worse. Why haven't I learned? It's been 10 years. But anyway, so I apologize. I don't love having to wipe my nose on a video, but here we are. You can thank my children. Does anybody else have this? Is this just is this an Andrea thing? Or is this a weird post-baby thing? I'm curious. All right, back to knitting. I've been knitting for a while and am now ready to knit my first sweater. Woohoo! Which of your sweater patterns would you suggest for a first sweater? So I'm gonna say the DRK Everyday Sweater. I get this question so much, and it's always hard for me to answer just because I feel like I'm so far removed from that first sweater place so I would love if any of y'all want to throw in your 2 cents out of my patterns. What would you say would be a great first sweater pattern? I know a ton of people have done the Weekender. That one, which is nice because there's a lot of options. You can knit it in fingering weight. There's the Weekender Light, which is in fingering weight, the original one, which is worsted, and then the Weekender Crew, which is DK and has the crew neck. So there's 3 different of those patterns that you can choose from. And I know people have had success with that. I do think that there are some techniques in there that maybe are a little trickier. But maybe not. I mean, really, it's just the tubular cast on and bind off, and you can 100% just not do those. You can just do a regular cast on or a twisted German cast on, my other favorite. I have a tutorial for it, and a regular bind off. But so that one I would also throw in the ring just because I know it's been a lot of people's first time sweaters. But if I was to suggest one, I would say the DRK Everyday. I think that it is a classic silhouette, super comfy. You knit it from the top down so you can try it on as you go. Easy to modify. You know, you can make it longer. You can adjust the sleeve length. It will Again, I do use the tubular cast on by Enough in that sweater as well, but again, you can skip it if you just want to focus on trying a sweater for the first time and not worry about a trickier cast on if you haven't done that one before. So that is what I'm going to throw in the ring, but I would love to hear what everyone else says. So I'll link that one below. All right, next question. I have made both the tessellated vest and the pink velvet sweater with the original kits that they were released with. So the original yarn I used. When I blocked these knits, they grew so much. I must have overstretched, and now I'm wondering if there's any way to shrink them. I know pink velvet has ching fiber and it's a single ply, but I think the tessellated was a multi-ply. So yes, they both involve totally different yarns, and I would try reblocking them, and I would just really take care when you are blocking them. So throw them back in the bath. When you get them out, do not let them fall or drape out of your hand. When yarn is waterlogged, it can hold like 10 times its weight in water. It's just so heavy. So especially if you have like a sleeve droop over, like on your pink velvet, that thing's just gonna stretch. So really get in there, squeeze out all the water and hold it like a little baby so that none of it's stretching out while it's so waterlogged. Gently get it onto some towels after you've squeezed out as much water as you can. Roll it up, step on it, etc. When you go to lay it out, start with it kind of scrunched up as a little bundle and just gently start tapping it out. Go grab your tape measure and try to block it to the actual dimensions that are on your schematic, which is the second to the last page in your pattern, and try to keep it within those dimensions. So kind of scrunch it into shape and then just pat to smooth it and see if that doesn't help get it back into the right dimensions, because there is a chance, again, when that yarn is wet, you really can stretch it quite a bit. But here's the other thing I would be curious about. When you swatched, and I'm going to assume you swatched, did you wet block your swatch? And how big was it? Because what I wonder is if you had a situation where maybe you didn't block your swatch, and this is why it's important to, is because that would have shown you the true gauge, because your swatch would have grown as well pre and post blocking. So this is just the gentle reminder of always block your swatches. Do it the same exact way you plan to do the finished item that you're knitting, to really show, because there are yarns that are just gonna grow, or it's gonna show that your gauge, the looser we knit, I find like the more growth you're gonna see in that swatch. So if your gauge is looser than what's called for in the pattern, that too is gonna add to that growth, because there's gonna be more drape and kind of looseness. Where I find when it's knit up a little bit tighter, there are some designers out there and some knitters who love to really like push the size of the needle that they're using for the gauge, for the weight of yarn that they're using. So let's say they're using a fingering weight yarn, but they're gonna knit it up on 6 or 7s because they want this really drapey fabric. And that's fine, but one of the reasons why I don't love doing that just for myself personally is it loses a little bit of integrity and strength in how long that final object is going to last. Because when we knit at a certain level of tightness, that's why we always want to knit socks pretty tight. It actually helps strengthen the yarn when we weave it together that way with our stitches. And I also find that it does really help with like bounce back and stability of that item so that it doesn't stretch too much. So that's kind of my long-winded way of just saying, make sure you swatch and make sure you wet block the swatch to really see your gauge, because that might show you, oh, okay, once I blocked, it did grow and I should have dropped a needle size. So more just a note for future projects to keep that in mind. Like, make sure you're doing that. Try, if you can, if you've got the yarn, knit the bigger the swatch, the better. You know, I had a friend recently who knit, her and I both knit the same sweater, and mine has seen no growth since blocking. You know, it grew a little bit with blocking, but as I've worn it, which I've worn it quite a bit, no growth. It fits the way it should. Her sleeves grew like 4 inches. And so again, I wonder if it's a gauge thing where her gauge was looser and it kind of led to that more growth over time as she wore the item. So anyways, I hope that those tips help, but definitely see if you can't block again and just don't stretch it all out. Try and keep it into its shape and just do that little like pat, 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 pat. You know, I kind of scrunch it up, you know, into the dimensions I need it, and then I just to get it how I want it. All right, question number 5. I'm not skipping one, am I? No, okay. So I have a bunch of skeins of Spin Cycle dyed in the wool that I've bought at different times. I wouldn't say they really match each other. Lots of very different colorways. I'd like to knit the Shifty and use some of them up. If I bought a calm colorway for the MC, like the Grumpy Birds used in the original, then do you think it would work to use 3 colors that are a bit hodgepodge? Or is it advised to carefully choose each colorway to match and complement the others? So I definitely think you can use different colors, but they should have something that ties them together, because if they don't, you might end up just looking like there's random bands happening, because within each skein, you're already going to have some transitioning colors. So then when you go to the next color, you might just jump so wildly that it's like, oh, why is it all of a sudden going to here? So I would look for a connecting thread. If you have a decent little stash of it, I would lay them out and I would start grouping them into like 3 skeins and just try and find a common denominator in there. I don't know why I'm saying 3 skeins. That was just a random number. I think maybe I don't know why I said 3, but just try and find. Now, the first doesn't have to connect to the last. The first needs to connect to the second, and the second to the third, and the third to the fourth. So that's how you might be able to get this little hodgepodge of colors. Oh, you did say 3. Okay, that's why I had that number in my head. That's how you can get them to come together. So let's say the first skein has a little bit of purple in it, and then you find another one that's not purple, but it has some purple in it, and that's how you're going to tie 1 and 2 together. Now that second one that had a little bit of purple, well, also has a little bit of green, and you have one that has some green. So okay, now I'm going to put my green one here and kind of go that way. Just try to find a thread that gets you from one skein to the next, and then I think it can still be cohesive. And I love the idea of putting it together with a more neutral color, such as Grumpy Birds. There's a lot of them out there that aren't quite, so they're more monochromatic, like, oh, I just had it and it left my mind. Nostalgia would be one. Melancholia would be one. I kept wanting to say Malachite, which is one of my test knitters. That's what threw me. Melancholia, which I used, I think, for the Shift again as a great background color, because I knew it would be almost like a neutral that then I could play with colors to go on top. So yeah, that's what I would suggest. And I'm excited to hear how it goes for you. I bet you'll be able to find some common threads, just kind of, and it's fun that if you bought them at different places, at different times, it's almost like a little memory sweater. You'd be like, oh yeah, this is the one that I got at whatever festival or shop or what have you. All right, I guess that's it. I don't have any show and tell today. I spent this week writing a new sweater pattern, which I'm pretty excited about. It was a tough cookie to crack, but I did it. Big heartfelt thank you to my amazing tech editor, Megan Schmaltz, who just was in the thick of it with me. But I'm really excited about that one. And I just bound off a new shawl last night, which is the second iteration of the shawl. And I think I'm really happy with the change I made. I completely knit it. Some of you have asked about it. It's up there hanging in the back. I completely knit one and then decided, I think it could be better. So thankfully I had enough yarn where I just cast on a new one in the same colors and changed the shaping. And I think I'm really, really happy with the shaping. So that's pretty exciting. And I have a new cowl coming out in just a couple weeks that I'm super stoked about. We just did that photo shoot right after last week's video when we were getting attacked by acorns. But yeah, I guess that's all I got. So I need to hurry up and get this out. It is actually Friday morning. I usually record these earlier in the week and then put them out Friday, but life is lifing, and so we're just going with it. We are just going with it. So I'd love to hear what you're going to be up to this weekend. Are you going to do any fun fall activities? I want to go to like an apple orchard, or I don't know, a hike. Oh, like I'm starting to get that really good smell in the air. Might need to put a fire in the fireplace. Anyways, I hope whatever you do, you get to involve some making, whether it be knitting or spinning or sewing or crocheting or weaving or just making memories with the people you love. And I hope to see you back here next week. Bye.